Hi guys, welcome to your 1.3, 1.4 practice test solutions. Now, I always say that your practice test is your best friend because it'll help you get a good grade on your real test in a little while. So, I've decided to name my practice test. My practice test name is Fernando. Why did I name it Fernando? I don't know, it just sounded like a good name for a practice test. Alright, so let's take a look. Okay, so now what we have on this whole page is we have something called variables on both sides of the equation. And what we want to do when we have variables on both sides of the equation is we want to eliminate the weaker variable. Now, I should say that's something I highly recommend. There are other ways to do it, but I think it'll save you a little headaches later on solving if you can just eliminate the weaker one first. Now, which one is weaker? Y, and remember this is a positive Y or a 4Y. Well, yeah, you know it. Y is weaker, so I'm going to subtract a Y from both sides. Y minus Y cancel out, and what are you left with? You're left with a negative 12. What's 4Y minus Y? Yeah, that's just 3Y. Okay, so now we're ready to solve this problem. How do we eliminate the 3 times Y? Yeah, let's just go ahead and divide by 3 on both sides. Now, maybe we should just be really careful about getting that negative in our final answer, because a positive divided by a negative divided by a positive is a negative. So, what is 12 divided by negative 3? Or, excuse me, negative 12 divided by positive 3? Well, that's just negative 4. All right, so we got that one. Took a little while, but we got it. Let's take a look at the next one. Now, again, we have a variable on both sides, and we want to, I like to say, bully the weaker variable. That's not good to be a bully, but maybe in an equation we can bully them a little bit. Which one is weaker, 6n or n? Yep, n. So let's go ahead and subtract an n from both sides. Remember, that's just a 1n. N minus n cancels, and that's a 0. I don't have to write that 0. What do I need to do now? Let's just bring down that 3 on this side. Okay, what's 6n minus n? That's 5n minus the 15. Okay, so now we're ready to solve the equation. Let's add 15 to both sides, add 15 to both sides, and when we do that, those cancel out, and you're left with 18. 3 plus 15 is 18. And then over here, we still have the 5n. Now, let's get rid of the 5n by dividing by 5. Let's get rid of the 5 by dividing by 5, because this is multiplication. The inverse operation of multiplication is division. And then we'll cancel those out, and look what we get here. We get, first of all, we get this fraction of 18 over 5, which is not reducible. So one of the answers is 18 over 5. Now, that's improper, and there's nothing wrong with an improper fraction, but if that's going to give you nightmares tonight, having an improper fraction on your practice test, you can divide it out and say this. How many times does 5 go into 18? Goes in 3. 5 times 3 is 15, sorry, and we subtract and get 3. So we could also say this is 3 and 3/5. 3 3/5. Either one of these answers is perfectly fine. Uh-oh, number 3 gives us fractions. We don't like fractions. Fractions aren't that bad. We can deal with them. Okay, let's start eliminating the weaker variable. Now, which one's weaker? I've got positive 1/5 x or negative 2/5 x. Now remember, guys, a negative is always weaker than a positive. So let's eliminate the negative. How do we eliminate negative 2/5 x? Yeah, you guessed it. We add 2/5 x to both sides. Add 2/5 x to both sides. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to add 2/5 x to both sides. Now, negative 2/5 x plus 2/5 x eliminate to 0. And now all we have on this side is the 9. What's 1/5 x plus 2/5 x? Yeah, that's 3/5 x. And now we have this equation. Okay, so let's get rid of the 3/5 x. How do we get rid of the 3/5 with the x? Well, let's multiply by the reciprocal. What's the reciprocal of 3/5? It's 5/3. It's 5/3, and I'm going to multiply by 5/3, the reciprocal on both sides. So the reciprocal will cancel the number next to x, and now x is going to be all by itself. So that's what we wanted. Now, we've got to multiply these two fractions, and I'll put a 1 underneath that 9 just so it's a fraction also. There's a couple ways you could do this. You could multiply straight across and say 9 times 5 is 45, 1 times 3 is 3, and then you could do that division problem. But let me show you maybe an easier way to do this. I'm looking at this thing and I'm saying, well, I'm noticing that 3 and 9 are both divisible by 3. How many times does 3 go into 3? Once. How many times does 3 go into 9? 3 times. And now we just have smaller numbers to deal with. What's 3 times 5? Well, that's 15. And then what's 1 times 1? That's 1. So my answer would be just 15. So x equals 15. Now, let's take a look at the next one. This one right here actually has parentheses. So before I start bullying my equations, or whatever you want to call it, I'm going to have to do the distributive property to cancel out those parentheses. And I know I need to use the distributive property because it's a number times a parentheses of things. And remember, times, not plus, but times. So now I'm going to do the distributive property. So 6 times h, that's 6h, plus 6 times 4, that's 24. And now I have the negative 2h over here. Okay, so what should I do next? Well, I'm looking at it and I say to myself, which one's a weaker variable, negative 2h or 6h? Yeah, negative 2h is weaker. Negatives are always weaker than positives. So how can I get rid of a negative 2h? Let's add 2h to it. And I'll do that same thing to both sides. I'll add 2h's to both sides. When I do that, what's 6? Well, let's go over here first. What's negative 2h plus positive 2h? That's 0. Now, I need some number over here. I can't just leave it blank. Normally I don't write 0, but in this case I actually have to write the 0 because I don't have anything else to bring down besides 0. So I'm just going to bring down that 0 because I need to fill that side with something. Over here, 6h plus 2h is 8h plus 24. All right, now we're in good shape. Let's solve for h. What's the first thing we're going to do? We're going to go ahead and subtract off 24 from both sides. So now I'm going to subtract 24 from both sides. When I do that, 24 minus 24 is 0, and all I'm left with on this side is an 8h. On the other side, however, I have 0, and I take away 24. If I have $0 and I owe my brother 24, I'm going to have negative $24. All right? Now, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to divide by 8 because I'm multiplying by 8, and I know the inverse operation of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 8. When that happens, these 8's will cancel to 1, and now I have h all by itself. That's what I wanted. I'll write my answer over here. Now, what's a negative divided by a positive? Yeah, that's a negative number. And what's 24 divided by 8? That's just 3. So my answer to number 4 was h equals negative 3. Okay, now, I like this problem. Let's read it. The area of this rectangle is equal to its perimeter. Write and solve an equation that models this solution or situation. Okay, so we know that area of this rectangle is equal to its perimeter. A for area, P for perimeter. Well, how do I find the area of a rectangle? That's easy. That's just length times width. And I'm going to come over here and say, well, that looks like a length to me, and this is a width. Now, how do I find the perimeter? There's multiple ways to do it, but I think maybe we just add up all the sides. So let's see here. What do we have? We have 6 and 6. Well, that's 12 when we add them up. But then we have to add the other two widths up. What's x and x? Well, that's 2x. So now we have, and I actually got a little excited over here, why don't we can actually replace the L and the W over here, L times W, with what L is 6, and W is x. So we have 6x on this side, and we still have 12 plus 2x on this side. So length times width gives me my area of the rectangle, and perimeter is 6 plus 6, which is 12, plus x plus x, which is 2x. And I know I can do that because they tell me the area is equal to the perimeter. That's a given fact that I can use to solve. All right, let's clean this up. What's 6 times x? That's just 6x. So that's 6x equals 12 plus 2x. And it says it wants an equation. This looks like an equation, so let's go ahead and write it on the line. 6x equals 12 plus 2x. And that's just the equation that I'm going to solve here in a minute. All right, so let's recopy our equation, and now let's figure out what the solution is. So I have 6x plus 6x, is equal to 12 plus 2x. All right, now what am I going to do next? The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to eliminate the weaker variable. Which one is weaker? Yeah, the 2x is weaker than the 6x, so I'm going to subtract a 2x from both sides. I'm going to subtract a 2x from both sides. What's 6x minus 2x? That's 4x. So now I have 4x is equal to 12. And then I just go ahead and divide both sides by 4, and I get, let's see here, x equals, because the 4 is canceled, 12 divided by 4, that is 3. So my solution is x equals 3. And I'm done. Okay, so on the second page, which is the 1.4 section, we're not so much going to have getting a variable equals a number at the final answer. What we're going to have is our variable, one of the variables is going to equal a bunch of other stuff with some other variables in it. So we're going to have more than one variable, and we're going to solve for it. Now, I have to pay careful attention because I'm noticing that they want us to solve for y in both 6 and 7. So we need to get these y's by themselves. So that's our goal here. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at it. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, what's connected to this y that I want to get rid of? Yeah, it's this negative 3x. And how do I get rid of a negative 3x and make it go away? I just add 3x to both sides. I just add 3x to both sides. Now, when I do that, these eliminate to 0, and I don't need to write that 0. Y is by itself, and that's what they asked us to do, right? Get y by itself. Now, can you take 12 and add 3x? No way, you can't take 12 and add 3x. That's like adding a chicken and a duck. That's a chiduck. That's not right. So what we're going to do is we're just going to copy down the 3x that we added to both sides, and then we have the plus 12 that was already there, and that's our answer. That's all we have to do. Now, some of you may have gotten y equals 12 plus 3x, and that is also correct. So either one of these answers would be okay to write on the line. Okay. Let's take a look at this number 7. Now, number 7, we want to isolate this y right here. And first of all, we want to eliminate our addition and subtraction. Well, what's being added to the 2y? The 4x. So let's subtract 4x. Let's subtract 4x from both sides. All right, when we do that, those cancel out, and now we still have the 2y equals, I'm going to put the minus 4x first because I like to put x's before things that don't have variables. That's just kind of a form we like sometimes. And then I have to just write the plus 16. This is a positive 16, so I write plus 16. Now, I cannot add a negative 4x and a 16. This has an x and this doesn't have an x, so there's nothing I can do there. But I can, now I want to see about getting y by itself. What's connected to the y? 2 times y. How do I get rid of times 2? I just divide everything by 2. Divide everything by 2. And that will eliminate this 2, but then I've got to clean it up over here. So here we go. So y equals, what's negative 4x divided by 2? Well, first of all, it's going to be negative. And what's 4 divided by 2 is 2. So this is negative 2x. Plus, what's 16 divided by 2? 16 divided by 2 is 8. So I'm coming up with the equation y equals negative 2x plus 8. And I think I got that one right. Cool. Alright, so on number 8, for some reason, we have this equation d equals rt. I think this is a distance, rate, time problem. You can probably see that in your science class. Alright, so now let's figure out how we can get rid of the t, because we want to get r by itself. They tell us that because it's underlined, and I'm noticing right here it's kind of hard to tell. The r is underlined. Well, that's easy. If t is connected to r, let's get rid of the t. And how is the t connected to the r? Yeah, by multiplication. And what's the inverse of multiplication? Division. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides of this equation by t. And that will cancel this t, and now r is by itself. So now I get r equals d divided by t. And that's my answer, because I don't know what d, r, and t are. Maybe my science teacher will give me some numbers to put in here and I can actually get an answer. But for now, my r is equal to my d divided by t. And I believe r is kind of a speed or velocity. D would stand for distance and t would stand for time. So you can think of velocity or rate is equal to the distance divided by the time. But we'll let your science teachers explain about that more. Alright, now we want to get this t by itself. I equals PRT. Okay, so what's connected to the t? Well, p and r are connected to the t, and they're connected by multiplication. Well, that's easy. What's the inverse of multiplication? The inverse of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by p and r. I'm going to divide both sides by pr. P cancels p. R cancels R, and now we're left with just good old-fashioned t. So t is equal to I, that's an I if you didn't know, not a 1, just an I, over PR. And we're done. T equals, and I'll write that on the line here, T equals I over PR. Okay, so it says using your formula in number 9. Now I can't see number 9, but I think I remember it. I think the equation was T equals I over P times R. And it says using your new formula in number 9, what is T when I is 72, P is 400, and 3 is percent. 3%. And they give us a little hint here. Don't forget to change your rate into a decimal before solving for t. Okay, we can do that. So now I got t is equal to, well, what's I? They'd say I is $72. So I actually stands for interest. This is a money type of thing here. So I'm going to put $72 on top, the interest. Okay, what's P? Well, P is 400. So I'm going to put 400 on the bottom, but I'm going to multiply that by R. Now, it says R is 3%, but it tells us to change it to a decimal. So if I have 3% and I want to change that to a decimal, I have to move the decimal 2 places to the left, because a percent is always out of 100. When I move the decimal 2 places to the left, I no longer need the percent sign. So I'm going to say 0.03. So now I'm going to say 0.03 right here. Alright, let's see if I can do this. Alright, so now let's go ahead and do this multiplication problem in the denominator, and we'll take this answer and divide it into 72. So I have 0.03, and I want to divide that into I don't want to divide yet. I want to multiply. So I want to take 400, and I want to multiply by 0.03. Well, There's shortcuts and long cuts, but let's just do it the long way. So 3 times 0 is 0, 3 times 0 is 0, 3 times 12 is 12. All right, bring down a 0. This will all be zeros because we're multiplying by 0 on everything. And let's add it up. We've got a 0, we've got a 0, we've got 2 plus 0, which is 2, and then we've got 1 plus 0, which is 1. Now, how many times do I have to move the decimal? Well, I have to move the decimal 1, 2. So I've got to move the decimal 1, 2 times. So now I get an answer of 12 when I do this multiplication problem here. So now I have t equals 72 divided by 12. Now, there's multiple things you could do here, but I just happen to know that 12 goes into 72 6 times. And if you didn't know that, you can always just do the long division or reduce the fraction. But I just happen to know that. So now I have t equals 6. And in this case, t would be, well, I don't know what the time is. Is it years? Probably a years. Years or months, but we'll say years. All right, and that's the answer to number 10, and that will conclude our solutions to the practice test. All right, study this hard, guys. See your teachers for questions if you have them, and good luck on the test coming up over this.